Hello once again everyone, and welcome back to a video I haven't done in a while, which is I have gotten a bunch of new stuff that has appeared or will appear in various videos as I do things or footage on the channel. And like always, I like to go over all the pieces that I have in a little bit of detail and share some of my thoughts about them and my recommendations, etc. So we're going to go from my left to right. You're obviously the opposite. I don't care what you think. Anyway, so first and foremost, when it came to this side of things, over half of them, I just kind of came into. Very fortunately, a friend of mine came down here back in May and wasn't using these anymore and said, here, gave them to me. I was like, sweet, all right, cool. So first on the list, we're going to go ahead and go over these couple axes from Descendant Leather. Shout out to Lachlan if you watch any of my videos. But he makes great stuff. He's been making it for quite a while for his group up in Asheville and has now been selling them pretty prominently across the southeast. I got a pair of Danax trainers and then I got a pair of hand axe trainers. The reason I actually broke out my Danax is because this is a good comparison. So as you can see, a little bit longer. Obviously the head is much broader. Weight-wise, mine is on a heavier haft. This haft isn't necessarily light per se, despite it being relatively thin, but it's much less dense when you cut with it. And because of its shape, I find that it's not hard for me to naturally pull it back if I worry that a shot's going to land too hard versus that I feel more inclined to extend. I have sparred relatively extensively with these, both against each other and against other weapons, and yeah, they're pretty comfy. It's a great Danax trainer, a little bit head heavy, but that's a-okay. They hit about the same as a synthetic longsword, and coincidentally in the Yeehaw rules, this counts exactly the same as a synthetic longsword. So overall, good investment. Really the only thing that is a little bit obnoxious is the hafts are slightly taking damage over time, but it's wood, you can replace it. And this one screw is a little bit prominent on the side here. But beyond that, great trainer. Really happy that I have a pair of them because that meant I could, test them, play around with them and stuff like that. And people get to use them at Yeehaw, yay! Now, for the hand axes, these have been playing around with a lot because, side note, I love little hand axes. These are actually very different from each other, which is kind of fun. So the one in my right hand right now it's got brass colored studs, but the head is a little bit smaller, as you can see by comparison. I believe though the handle is slightly longer. So they're not all perfectly made the same, or maybe, I don't actually know when my friend got these, so this one might have been gotten earlier or later, I don't quite know. But again, everything I just said about the long ones, same with these shorter ones. They're nice and comfortable. A lot more comfortable than some other attempts I've felt as far as people trying to make sparring axes. They're heavy enough in the head and in the hand that they naturally want to pivot, which is great. The balance point feels good on both of them. Really, no complaints. And when you do hit someone with them, they are just almost as soft as a Dossack, honestly, unless you really put force into it. So, great trainers. Really can't wait to see them in the hands of others in more dynamic situations. Now, the final gift that his friend gave me was they also had a shield that was way too big for them. Now, despite evidence to the contrary, I do want to point out I'm not necessarily all that much into Dark Age Viking stuff. It's cool, of course, but really not necessarily my bag. However, because I also happen to work at a local meadery, this stuff just kind of keeps coming up, so I was like, hey, good for that at least. So I've done a little bit of research about this shield. I don't know who made it. They've actually got they've got the date they made it and some other stuff in the Elder Truth Arc that I need to translate to read. But it's a relatively historically constructed shield. It's on the larger side. This is the biggest you'll see shields of this period. In fact, this is even a little bit bigger, but for someone of my height, it's not necessarily that weird. It is not fully historically constructed, so it looks like it's planked here. It's actually not. It's a solid piece that someone has carefully cut grooves into, as well as stained to make it look like it's made out of overlapping planks, which, props to them. That's a really nice detail. Most people forget about decorating the back of the shield, so I can definitely give props there. The handle, I'm probably going to cut in a little bit to make it a bit more ergonomic and add some wrap to it because it's a little bit uncomfortable. I have sparred with it a couple times, and it's a beefy boy. It's a big shield. It could also probably benefit from having a neck strap, so that way it can partially suspend like my Acronch does. You do see that shown historically with larger shields, so that's just fine. The boss is, I think, actual iron possibly, but either way, it's a good shield for my purposes. Mostly I'm just going to be standing around with this thing at various events, but I have sported it. It's a lot of fun. It's a good little investment. And because I ended up with all this stuff, I was like, well, it's not that much money on Purple Heart, and I was ordering some stuff anyway, so I went ahead and got myself a little Western hilted sparring blade. So the reason I explain that is because you can get this in a couple different versions. You can get the Eastern hilt or the Western hilt. This, for reference, is the Western hilt. You can also get sparring or reenacting blade. This is the sparring blade because it's a little bit lighter, and I wanted, if I was going to use it, I wanted it to be much more leaning toward, safer feathers or things like that. And I'm actually quite impressed with this little sword. Again, not necessarily a huge fan of Viking stuff, but it's nice and small, it's nice and light. It really does just feel like a big dagger with a simplistic handle. It's long enough in the handle that I can naturally extend rather than it being super uptight. I'm still getting used to the pommel configuration. Again, just not my bag, but not that hard to get used to. It's no stiffer, I would say, than my 133 trainer from Albion. So again, just nice little investment. And here's a bonus that I don't necessarily know if it was intentional or not, but there's this little strap here, and they sit together quite nicely. So if I ever need to store them, boom, there you go. But I'll probably put some footage up of me sparring with that soon just because it's fun. Now, moving ahead in time, probably the most interesting one that I've gotten, that you'll definitely be seeing more of, is I got a pair of these helmets. So this is a cut and thrust salette that I got from Barina Calf. They're the same ones that made my Bergonet helmet. I think I've shown that off before, and if I haven't, I'll definitely make sure to show it off. They make a lot of cut and thrust helmets relatively cheap, which is great. They actually give you two visors. They give you a wolf rope visor for if you're doing rattan fighting, or a cut and thrust face. That's just a nice bonus. I was looking at getting these because they're an earlier period helmet, and they've got a nice protective face, and I'm always on the lookout for more cut and thrust style options for people who want to do lesser harness fectin and have an open face. And I'm actually rather impressed with this. So I still need to do some further testing on it, but basically in its current shape, whenever you get a helmet from them, it should be known as, this, by the way, is a separate piece. It's going to come bare. There's nothing in there other than a chin strap, so you will have to finagle your own padding situation. I'm probably going to add some helmet foam inside of this to pad it out a little bit. And then I also got the pad hood, but I'll get back to that again in a second. It's just a simple strap on the back that holds the visor. Then it's just hooked in. It's a nice far enough hook that you can, it'll stay in there pretty well on its own, but if I pull it off, this could be replaced with the Wolf Rip Breezy. It's actually not bad to see out of. I might paint them a different color than silver so people can tell that it's perforated plate and this is meant to just be this shape, but certainly a bit dense. It's heavier than a helmet like this should be historically, but I don't really care if it's safe. And then as part of its padding and also to add some more throat protection, I just picked up some simple padded hoods off Colts of Athena, which all this does is that way when you throw it on, the visor comes down to about here. It's now making sure there's no gap that things can get up. So he will just throw this on over their gorget, over everything else, slap the helmet on, and bada bing, bada boom, you now have a helmet. But further testing on these to come before I can really truly recommend them. They will see action on the field at Yeehaw for sure, and more action in here because, again, it's just another opportunity to have an open-faced helmet. Now, next on the list, speaking of armor, one of the things that I needed to get, well, didn't realize I needed to get, but now I kind of do, and it's fun to kind of go through this process twice. Back when I started competing, I was on the edge of tournaments still provided swords because they were not all that available. So the first tournament that I fought in, Long Point, they had a pair of synthetics that everybody used. They also, for the steel tournaments, I believe a lot of people were still using loaner steels for that. And then slowly but surely it became expected to, there was the phrase, bring your own steel, and that's just now how things are. No one even writes bring your own steel anymore, it's just expected. Armor, on the other hand, the armor community was kind of that same thing because there wasn't a lot of good harness fighting steel swords available. That's now changed, which is really, really cool. But that has led to the same thing cropping up where when I went up to Kansas, I kind of had to act like a robber knight, run around borrowing people's swords for when I was sparring. So I was like, I should probably get one of my own. Now this actually is not a dedicated Harness Fectin sword. This is the Fiore trainer from Purple Heart Army, made by VB. And the reason I went with this is because this is one of the swords that I borrowed up north, and I was quite impressed with it. It's pretty flexy, not like super flexy. You know, if I put it on the ground, I can get a bit more flex going, but it's on the stiffer side. It's on the longer side without being ridiculous. I actually really like the proportions that this has. It's got a longer handle than my Albion Meyer, for example, but otherwise, like, crossguard and blade feels about the same. Because of its simplistic construction, I can take it apart and put it back together if anything breaks, and it just feels good swapping between these two grips. You know, be it I'm playing out at distance with all the normal stuff, or be it I turn over into harness fighting, it just feels good. And on top of that, you can get a little engraving. So I went ahead and got Ardimento, which I've gotten an award for before, engraved on the fort, so I always know it's mine. So more fighting with this to come. You'll probably see me carrying around quite a bit. I am going to put a thrusting tip on it for when I'm going against people, you know, for realsies. Even though I do really like that we're not seeing a ton of rolled tips on these anymore. We're seeing these nice swelled tips. So glad this is becoming common because I think these are the way to go. But I am really enjoying this sword and I can't wait to use it. Now here's a weird one that I didn't necessarily see coming, but just kind of happened upon. This is actually a find of my father's. So I fought with these spearheads up at WAW. If you want to watch the footage of me fighting, it's up. And I was rather impressed with them because I'd never seen them before, but I didn't figure out what type they were. Well, my father happened to be looking around and looking into it and found the guy. I'll get the resource from him and put it in the comment below. But these I'm pretty happy with. So they come in a couple different shapes. These are the winged ones that I was using. They are very, very stiff. But again, they have that nice swelled tip, so I don't really care. The other benefit is these are super cheap. Like maybe like 12 bucks a spearhead practically for, you know, a good, robust sparring spearhead that won't let you down. We went ahead and mounted them on lighter hafts just because we didn't need to make overly dense spears. And we'll occasionally use them, you know, for like demo purposes or things along those lines. And, you know, I'll probably carry one along with my Dark Age Viking kit. But I'm really happy with these. These are good armored spears because the biggest issue when it comes to doing harness fectin is if you do use synthetic spearheads, there's always that density to safety ratio that you're running through. Steel spearheads, you got to make them flexible enough, or you got to make them kind of on the cusp of this, which is they don't have a lot of flex to them, but because they don't have a ton of mass to them, they're really not that bad. Like I said, I was quite impressed with these, and on a lighter haft, it feels pretty controlled, and it kind of bounces out nicely. So you've got the winged spearhead version, and then also, this is the same length as the wings, but without them, put on a slightly longer haft. And then this is the one that really surprised me. This is, I think, 14 inches. You would expect this one to be the one that flexes, but it does not flex at all more in the slightest than the others. So it's just consistent across the board. And again, just good spears for harness fectin. So I'm pretty happy, at least as long as everyone's wearing mail. If you're not wearing mail, I do not recommend you spar with steel spearheads, or steel weapons at all for that matter. But either way though, those are some of the acquisitions that you will probably be seeing around videos or in use and things like that. When I have more thoughts on especially some of the later pieces, I'll go ahead and talk about them further, but expect to see them out and about and around. So otherwise, as always, thank you very, very much for watching. We'll go over some other equipment acquisitions another time.